She saw the screen before I could turn it over. I want to be precise about the sequence, because the sequence matters. She had come into the kitchen for water. I had heard her door, heard her in the hallway, heard the specific rhythm of her footsteps that I had catalogued over 11 months of shared walls. And I had had my phone face up on the kitchen table with her contact open, her name at the top of the screen, my thumb on the delete button. I had had enough time to register that she was there. I had not had enough time to do anything about it. She saw the screen. She saw her name. She saw where my thumb was. I put the phone face down on the table, which was the least useful thing I could have done because she had already seen. And the face-down phone on the table was not an explanation, but a confirmation. And the kitchen was very quiet for a moment, in the way kitchens are quiet when something has just been understood by two people at the same time. She didn't say what I expected her to say. She pulled out the chair across from me, and she sat down. And she looked at me with the particular expression she had when she was deciding how to say something she had already fully thought through, and she said, "Read the last message." I looked at her. "In the conversation," she said. "The last thing I sent you. Read it." I picked up the phone. I turned it over. Her name was still at the top of the screen, the delete option still present in the way delete options are, patient and permanent and waiting. I scrolled to the bottom of our conversation. I read it. The kitchen was quiet for a different reason after that. "My name is Noah Reyes. I am 31 years old. I work as a data analyst for a financial services company, which means I spend my days finding the signal in noise, identifying patterns in large sets of information and making an argument about what those patterns mean. I am good at this work. I am considerably less skilled at applying the same methodology to the information in my own life, which is a gap I have been aware of and have chosen not to address. I live in a 2-bedroom apartment that I have shared for 11 months with a roommate I found through a listing that was honest about the rent and less forthcoming about everything else. Which is to say, it did not mention that the person I would be living with was the specific kind of person who becomes the axis around which a life quietly rearranges itself. And that I would spend 11 months noticing this and filing it under a category I had labeled manageable, and which had turned out to be neither managed nor manageable. Her name was Suki Tanaka. She was 29. She worked in UX research. She spent her days interviewing people about how they experience things, listening for the gap between what people said and what they actually meant, which was a skill she brought home with her and which I had found over 11 months, both useful and occasionally alarming. She was very good at hearing the thing behind the thing. She had moved in on a Wednesday in October with 2 bookshelves worth of books and a specific system for the kitchen that she had explained on the first day, and which I had adopted within the week because it was genuinely better than what I had been doing. She had a plant collection that occupied the south-facing windowsill in the living room, in an arrangement she had not asked permission for and which had made the apartment look, I had thought privately, like somewhere a person actually lived. She had dark hair she wore in a low knot most days and loose on weekends, and quick hands that moved when she was explaining something, and a laugh that was always slightly delayed. Not from slowness, but from the half-second she spent deciding whether the thing was actually funny before committing to the response. Which meant when the laugh came, it was genuine rather than reflexive. And you had earned it. I had been cataloging when I earned it for 11 months. She had a habit of leaving small notes, not on paper, in texts, little observations sent without preamble or expectation of response. The kind that said, "I saw this and thought of you," without saying that directly. A photograph of a sign with a grammar error. A weather alert she thought I would find interesting. A food recommendation for the area I had mentioned I was going to that week. They arrived at irregular intervals, and I had been receiving them for 11 months, and they had been doing something to me that I had been refusing to name. The existing dynamic was one I had constructed carefully and which had been, for most of 11 months, holding. We were good roommates. We were more than good roommates in the specific way that becomes a problem when you think about it too directly, which was why I had a policy about not thinking about it too directly. The policy had been functioning adequately until approximately 3 weeks ago, when something had shifted in the texture of the apartment, not dramatically, just enough. And I had made a decision. The decision was to manage the situation. The mechanism for managing the situation was to create distance. The mechanism for creating distance I had arrived at after 3 weeks of intermediate steps that had not worked, was to delete the contact. Not block, delete. A subtler version of the same problem-solving approach, which in retrospect was not a well-conceived plan. She had come into the kitchen for water. She had seen her name on my screen. Now she was sitting across from me, telling me to read the last message. I read it. It had been sent 4 days ago, 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday, which I knew because I had looked at the timestamp the night she sent it, and every subsequent time I had opened the conversation, which had been more times than I was going to account for. The message said, "I don't know if you've noticed, but something's been different lately. Not bad different, just different. I've been trying to work out if it's me or you or both of us, and I think it might be both. Anyway, that's all. No response needed. No response needed." I had not responded. I had opened it 11 times and not responded, and on the 12th time I had opened it, I had gone to her contact and put my thumb on the delete button, and she had come in for water. I put the phone face down again. She was watching me. "You read it when I sent it," she said. It was not a question. "Yes," I said. "And you didn't respond," she said. "No," I said. "And now," she said, "you were deleting my contact." I said, "Yes." She looked at me with the expression she used when she was listening for the thing behind the thing. "Why?" she said. I thought about the 3 weeks of distance creation and the intermediate steps that hadn't worked, and the phone face down on the table, and the patient permanent delete option still waiting on the screen beneath it. "Because it wasn't working," I said. "What wasn't working?" she said. "The management," I said. "What management?" she said. I was quiet for a moment. "Of the situation," I said. She looked at me. I could see her doing the UX thing, the listening, the locating of the thing behind the thing. "Noah," she said. "I know," I said. "You're going to have to say it out loud," she said. "I can infer, but I want you to say it." I looked at the phone on the table. "The message," I said. "What you said in it. About something being different. Both of us." I stopped. "I've been trying to create distance because I was aware that something was different. And I knew what it was different because of, on my side, and I didn't think it was." I stopped again. "You didn't think it was reciprocal," she said. "No," I said. She was quiet. "So you were going to delete my contact," she said. "The idea was to manage the situation," I said. "By deleting me from your phone," she said. "It was not a well-conceived plan," I said. She looked at me for a long moment. Then she said something I had not expected her to say. "I sent that message," she said, "because I was trying to open a door without opening it all the way, in case you walked through it." A pause. "You didn't respond." "I know," I said. "I told myself no response needed, because I needed to leave you the option," she said. "But I wanted a response." She said it without drama, just factual. I wanted to know if the different thing was the same different thing. I looked at her across the kitchen table with the phone face down between us and the delete option underneath it, and 11 months of small notes and catalogued laughs, and the management of a situation that had not been manageable. What was the different thing? I said. On your side. She held my gaze. I started noticing when you weren't home, she said. The apartment has a quality when you're here and a different quality when you're not. And about 4 months ago, I noticed the difference. And then I couldn't stop noticing it. And then I had a problem. 4 months. I had been aware of the problem for 4 months. I had not identified the start of the problem as 4 months ago until she said it. And then I understood that 4 months ago was when I had started the intermediate steps, the ones before the distance creation, the ones that were the early version of the same management strategy that had not worked. 4 months, I said. Approximately, she said. I changed when I got home, I said. 4 months ago. Not the time, the quality. I started coming home differently. She looked at me. Because I knew you were there, I said. And I was managing what that meant. And the management started 4 months ago. She was quiet for a moment. We've both been managing the same thing for 4 months, she said. In opposite directions, I said. You away from it, she said. And you, I said. Toward it, she said. Slowly, with a text at midnight that said no response needed. I have poor survival instincts around women who open doors without opening them all the way and wait to see if you walk through. I had not walked through. I had deleted the door. Suki, I said. I know, she said. The message, I said. I read it 11 times. She went very still. 11, she said. I counted, I said. Not deliberately. I'd open the conversation, and there would be one more than before. Why didn't you respond? She said. Because I didn't know what it meant, I said. And I was afraid to ask in case it meant something smaller than what I was, than what I had in the file. The file, she said. 11 months of things I was not examining, I said. The notes you send. The way you laughed at the thing I said on the second Tuesday. I remembered what I said because of how you laughed. The kitchen system that was better than mine. The plants on the windowsill that made the apartment look like somewhere I wanted to come home to. I stopped. I had a file, and I had been not examining it for 11 months, and then 4 months ago I noticed it was getting harder to not examine, and I made a plan. The management strategy, she said. Yes, I said. Which culminated in the contact deletion, she said. In a decision to delete the contact, I said. I hadn't completed the deletion. Because I came in for water, she said. Yes, I said. At the specific moment, she said. Yes, I said. She looked at me. I was thirsty, she said. I know, I said. I'm very glad I was thirsty, she said. Something in my chest shifted. Not dramatically. Just enough to be unmistakable. Suki, I said. Yes, she said. The thing in the file, I said. I'm going to need to say it clearly so we're not inferring. Please, she said. I have been living with you for 11 months, I said. And I have been aware for most of that time that the apartment is different when you're here. And that the difference is the specific quality of being in a place with someone you. I stopped and found the right word and used it. Someone you love. And that I had that thought at some point and did not know what to do with it, so I put it in the file and managed around it, and eventually decided that managing wasn't working, and the correct solution was distance, and the correct mechanism for distance was deleting your contact. Which was, as I have noted, not a well-conceived plan. The kitchen was very quiet. She looked at me for a long moment. Then she reached across the table and picked up my phone. She turned it over. The screen was still on her contact. The delete option was still there. She handed it to me. I looked at the phone, then at her. "Do something else with it," she said. I scrolled up through the conversation. 11 months of it. The first message, which was about the broken hallway light and who was going to email the building manager. The grocery coordination texts. The ones that were just observations, sent without preamble. The small notes that had been doing something to me for 11 months. I scrolled to the bottom. Her message. "I don't know if you've noticed, but something's been different lately. Not bad different, just different." I typed below it. I noticed. It's the same thing on my side. I should have said so 11 days ago. I showed her the screen. She read it. She looked up at me. "You counted the days too," she said. 11 days since you sent it," I said. I was aware. She took the phone from my hand and typed something and gave it back. She had typed 11 months, 11 days, and a contact deletion. That's a very specific kind of slow. I looked at it, then at her. "I'm an analyst," I said. "I look for patterns. I'm slower to act on them." "That's not analysis," she said. "That's avoidance with good vocabulary." "Yes," I said. "It is." She was looking at me with the expression that was not quite the full laugh, but was everything that preceded it, the half-second of deciding, the approach. Then it arrived. The laugh. Brief and genuine, the earned kind. And I had earned it with avoidance, with good vocabulary, which was the most accurate description of 11 months of my behavior I had ever heard. "Come here," she said. I came around the table. She stood and she was close, and she looked at me the way she looked at things she had decided to look at directly, and she said, "If you had finished deleting the contact, I was going to come and knock on your door." "How do you know?" I said. "You didn't know what I was doing." "I knew what you were doing," she said. "I've been watching you manage for 4 months. I knew where it was going." She held my gaze. "I was going to knock and ask if we could talk. And then I was going to tell you what I just told you. And then I was going to see what happened." "You had a plan," I said. "I always have a plan," she said. "I had a plan," I said. "Yours was worse," she said. "Significantly," I said. She put her hand on the front of my shirt, not a grab, just a placement. The way she placed things she was certain about. I put both hands around her face, slowly, and she turned into it in the way that says yes before any word does. And I kissed her in the kitchen at whatever time it was in the morning, with her contact still open on my phone on the table, and the delete option still patiently present on the screen. She pulled back. She picked up the phone from the table. She navigated to her contact. She clicked delete. I stared at her. She looked at the phone, then at me. "Resave me," she said. "However you want." I took the phone. I resaved the contact. She looked at what I'd put. She looked at me. "Suki home," she said. "You live here?" I said. She looked at the phone for a moment. Then she set it down on the table, face up this time, her contact visible, the name I had chosen for her sitting there. "Yes," she said. "I do." The plants moved 6 months later. Not all of them. The ones on the south-facing windowsill stayed where they were because the light was right and she had been correct about the arrangement. But the small succulent she kept on her desk migrated to the kitchen windowsill. And a fern I had not previously owned appeared on my bookshelf. And the apartment developed the quality of a place where two people's things have found their natural resting positions among each other's. which is different from a place where one person's things are simply present. She kept sending notes. The same kind, observations, small things, sent without preamble or required response. The difference was that now I responded. Not to all of them, not always with words. Sometimes with a photograph of something I had seen that was in the same conversation as whatever she had sent. She had described this once as the way she knew I was paying attention, and I had said I was always paying attention, and she had said she knew, she just needed evidence. 4 months into us, the real 4 months, the ones with a start date we could point to. She texted me from the living room while I was in the kitchen. I looked up the word for the feeling you get when you almost lose something and don't. I typed back, "What is it?" She typed, "There isn't one in English. There probably should be." I went into the living room. She was on the couch with her feet up and her phone in her hands, and she looked up when I came in. "We should invent one," I said. She thought about it. "Something with almost in it," she said. "And still." "Almost still," I said. "That's not a word," she said. "We're inventing it," I said. She considered this with the half-second of the laugh approaching. "Okay," she said. "Almost still. The feeling when something nearly didn't happen and then did." "Filed," I said. She smiled. The full version. 2 years later, when people asked about us, I told them I was deleting her contact and she caught me. And then she sat down and told me to read the last message. I said it plainly because the plain version contained everything. She always said, "He re-saved me," as Suki home. And then she showed them. I always said, "You live here." She always said, "I know. That's the point." We agreed on what the point was. We had been slower to agree on it than was strictly necessary. But we got there. And the almost still of it, the way it had nearly not happened, over a glass of water and a phone face up on a table, had become, over time, less of an alarm and more of a fact we carried with us. The specific fact of how close the other ending had been. How glad we were to be in this one instead. What would you have done? Would you have looked up from the screen or turned the phone over and hoped she hadn't seen? And have you ever almost managed your way out of something that would have been the best thing in your life? And understood, just in time, that avoidance with better vocabulary is still avoidance? Tell me in the comments. If this one caught you, leave a like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.